Okay, thank you. So we talked with Iceland earlier on. Other countries are facing difficulties. And we are going to talk about the fate of women in the Republic of Congo who are too often abused. So please welcome the winner of the Sakharov Award 2007, Dr. Mukwege. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, it's very difficult to speak after the brilliant speakers you just heard, but let us briefly say a few words about the situation on the front of inequalities, especially in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'd like to thank and pay tribute to the organizing team, those who organized this forum, and more specifically, its president, Mr. Jacques Attali, who accepted to work with Positive Economy to come up with a proposal that casts a new light on humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, what is more important but thinking about future generations? There are many uncertainties bearing on the future of humankind and future generations. This is linked to migrations, with an increased number of migrants, of displaced people, of victims of climate change. Statistics show it in a very laconic way. According to UNICEF, in 2012, more than 2.2 million children are undernourished on a systematic way, and sometimes very close to us. So we don't need to just talk about developing countries which are regularly ravaged by hunger, droughts, war, and epidemics. Figures from the FAO show that 26 million people in this world suffer from chronic undernourishment. And what can we say about epidemics in many countries in the south? This forum can't forget that in September last year, in Kinshasa, in Kasai, young people who were demonstrating to demand that the Constitution should be observed were greeted by rocket launchers and true bullets, and many of them were killed. This forum should not forget that as I was coming here, five young people were sentenced to death because they demanded an electoral calendar in their country. This forum can't forget that an increasing number of people are living in poverty. This forum should refuse that in Democratic Republic of Congo, sexual violence is still benefiting impunity, total impunity, and acts as a metastasis of a cancer. In my hospital, we continue treating more than 1,300 victims of rapes. And in the past year, we were treating more than 3,000 victims each year. This forum should also be a forum to refuse that Congolese are cast in the night, deprived of light and deprived of freedom, and fighting against violence and poverty. What a path of violence and humiliation on which millions of Africans and Congolese have to walk when they're fighting for their dignity, which they're trying to find in the West. We should have an ideal to fight against inequality, against conflicts, against epidemics, which characterize life in my country. However, the Democratic Republic of Congo has a very strong economic growth, but growth without prosperity only benefits a small group of people, those who have political power and also, unfortunately, economic power. We're totally powerless, and we are the spectators of a tragedy, of an unprecedented humanitarian crisis that's taking place in the Kasai with the discovery of tens of massive graveyards, and we see no justice coming on our way because in the Democratic Republic of Congo, recent efforts already identified a large number of common graves, but unfortunately, international justice takes time before dealing with these cases. I have a hope that the case of my country will be dealt with because we have a duty in terms of humanitarian action. Ladies and gentlemen, positive revolution is gender equality, women's oppression, and gender inequalities that continue to exist dehumanize and humiliate those who are oppressed, but also those who oppress. So we should wish for this equality that we expect to experience one day, but which is still a long way away. We know that at the moment women are determined by social and cultural and religious determinants despite of science. It's enslaving women, and this has been fostered by religions and cultures for centuries. This identity of women is more particularly denied in areas of conflicts. When you look at what happens in Syria, Iraq, Colombia, in my country, but then you realize that it's all over the planet when there are conflicts. Those who pay are women. In my country, those who wanted cheap weapons in order to enslave an entire people used systematic rape of women as a weapon of war. At the end, the result was exactly the same as the use of weapons of massive destruction. You can imagine a woman raped in public before the eyes of her husband, her kids, when kids are forced to watch this scene and they have no option but is fleeing their village to become anonymous elsewhere. And then the village is left in the hands of those predators who are going to exercise other traffics. These women are the victims of a long culture of despise of women who are considered as inferior to men. To these teachings, today we have an obligation to fight against this by teaching respect of women. Ladies and gentlemen, gender equality is still very theoretical, despite some small victories conquered by some women. But some of the victories we conquered a few years back are victories we're losing at the moment. And countries in the West are not doing any better. So we have to reform our politics and social and economic models. But as I said in Le Monde, in November last year, the more I travel around the world, the more I'm struck to see how women are instrumentalized, rejected, and dehumanized. And I'm struck to see how much social standards continue maintaining them as under men. And that's unacceptable. But when we trust women, when we give them all opportunities in their family, in their community, everybody is doing much better. So it means that doing without women means that we lose on our development potential. Beyond gender equality, inequalities between women in the north and women in the south lead to conflicts. The gap is scandalous. Thanks to the progress in medicine and thanks to new technologies, maternal mortality has been reduced and is almost exceptional in the north. And when it happens, it's an accident or unavoidable. But this level of maternal mortality reaches alarming levels in countries in the world at about 1,000 for 100,000 births. And that's very often linked to a lack of political will and which reflects the place that society affords to women when women are the mothers of our humanity. There are material and human resources that exist and could be mobilized to put an end to this inequality, which is challenging our conscience. But to achieve that, we need political will from our leaders, but we also need strong international solidarity. In the South, many women are still making their will as they're giving birth because they know that labor is still a big risk for them. In Southeast Asia, women are also submitted to various mutilations and suffer lesions which are the consequences of unassisted labor, child labor. These women are humiliated in their family, in their community, but they're also excluded from the economy, and they can't make a living for them and their family, and therefore they have to live a life of non-dignity. This rectal vaginal fistula existed in Europe, was something that we knew in Europe and in the US, but it disappeared more than a century ago. At the moment in Europe, you have no schools to learn how to treat these pathologies because they were eradicated more than a century ago. But in our countries, the pathway to eradicate this humiliating pathology is still very long. Dear participants, how can we set the clock back? In our hospital, we have put in place a holistic program to manage women who've suffered a rape. First, they are treated physically because nothing can be done so far as these women suffer serious lesions. For many of them, their genitalia were destroyed with caustic products or with bullets that were shot voluntarily in their sex, or because they gave birth in traumatic circumstances and they have to undergo surgical procedures. Then the hospital can provide them with legal assistance if they can identify those who raped them. This is very important for the psychological reconstruction of victims. Step 3 is providing microcredit to these victims so that they can generate an income for themselves and get reincluded in society and in life. A special program was organized in cooperation with an NGO so that victims of sexual violence can turn their pain into a strength, and the results that we see go beyond all hopes. These women are fulfilled, they are entrepreneurs, they become financially independent, they own their shops and they can pay for their children's study. When I talked to one victim of sexual violence one day, and she'd arrived at the hospital in a very dire state, and this woman had enough money to pay, had $50, enough to pay for a dinner in Paris without wine. And she came to see me and she said, "You know, doctor, I started a small business and I bought a house. My kids go to school. They have 3 square meals a day. And I'd like you to come and eat an omelette with us. That's a source of pride in our country." And this woman said, "You know, today, if a man loves me, he needs to come and live in my house. The day he's tired, he needs to go." This self-sufficiency, this strength, these women who've been dehumanized, they recover dignity and they carry the entire Congolese society on their shoulders and they support it. Ladies and gentlemen, today excluded people are a majority on this planet. Thousands and thousands of men and women, because of their living conditions, are dehumanized every day. And what we experience in our holistic management program allows us to say that there is hope for every single one of them. Inequality is not just affecting individuals. It also affects entire countries and invites us to rethink our international relationships. Let's not hide from reality and close our eyes. There is an environmental emergency. Mining operations have created huge damage to extract minerals, and militia use rapes as a weapon against the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this without forgetting pollution with mercury for the mining of gold or pollution with sulfur for mining of copper.
All this clamor, all these cries require a new direction. Humankind has never been so ill-treated than in these 2 last centuries. But we still have the humanistic culture we need to face these multifarious crises. Shall we remain spectators, or shall we muster what remains of humanity within us to put an end to these crises? It is not just a question of market forces, it is a question of political choices. Ladies and gentlemen, in the course of this positive forum, we are talking a lot about the equality of chances, which is a keystone of the positive revolution. We are far from being catastrophic in our outlook. Our children, our grandchildren, and the children of our grandchildren will all consider we are responsible and were responsible if we do not take up the challenge in the face of all the above-mentioned challenges. Our society itself needs a very deep transformation, needs new models. If our planet is to support its inhabitants, the world of tomorrow should be different, of course, than the world we have today and that we are familiar with. And as this forum says, for a better future, a future better than today, we need to build a viable future. That is our calling. Democracy must ensure that the principles of social justice and equality of chances remain central to the political, cultural, and economic, and technical and scientific initiatives, actions that will give meaning to our nations, to our communities, for local and global interaction. In this positive revolution, which requires major change in the way we conduct our business, we conduct our lifestyles, equality of chances must play a dominant role. Our message is clear. Our fates are intertwined, rich or poor. The interest of the rich will be preserved if there is more equality of chances and social justice. The economy will be more inefficient if it is based on inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out, and hope may run out. But our strong belief is that it is not too late for humankind to change direction and to restore the basic principles of equity. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all in the same boat, and that is a very true expression, today more than ever. Rich or poor, we must envision our common future in a common world. If wealth is not the essential driver of humankind, equity certainly is. And that is what a great many men and women of goodwill are working towards. And foundations such as this one that bring us together is doing so too. These men, these women, these NGOs must be encouraged, because the survival of humankind depends on the ideas they will put forward. Thank you.
Okay. Voilà. Merci à vous.
Thank you, Dr. Denis Mukwege. Thank you so much.